Hey guys, and welcome to the fifth installment of the Open Web Foundry. We're really excited to be kicking everything off today. We have with us Sebastian and also our We founder Sam. We're going to get started with some of the program details and all the things that you need to do to be a successful founder building on the Arweave protocol. So why don't you guys kick us off?
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us for the fifth iteration of the Open Web Foundry. The previous four iterations of this have yielded a huge number of really successful projects in the ecosystem. And over this time, it's become pretty clear that this program is the, would you say, the best path into the ecosystem and building a successful project on top of Arweave and the PermaWeb. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us. We're really, really excited about this one and can't wait to see what you build. So first, the program is split into two tracks. If you're here just to use kind of Arweave as storage for an existing application, we have a whole track for you. But if you're here to build a profit-sharing decentralized web application, we have a kind of full stack support system to help you get going with that. And so we've essentially split them into these two tracks so that the people, that are just like trying to use Arweave to store data for an existing application or a new application they're building, can get that information very, very quickly. And frankly, it's not that hard. We've built the protocol and the tooling around the protocol to make it extremely easy for you to just get on board and be like, hey, let me throw data onto this system, let me read the data back. That is very simple. So we'll cover that separately. But if you're here to understand how to build a fully decentralized web application where the user and the application itself is disintermediated from the power of a company, then we have a whole set of talks and a program, I suppose, of support to help you build that. We're going to be getting into today, ironically here, my disk is almost full. That's a good irony. Anyway, today, we'll talk first about what's in the storage track. So the simple components are integration workshops and one-on-ones. Like, hey, if you've got something that you want to build on top of Arweave, we'll tell you how to integrate. And while you're doing it, and frankly, it shouldn't be so difficult, we'll give you one-on-one advice and support so that you can just do that as fast as possible. Also, we have a system for giving you free storage on the Arweave network to get started with. And we'll try our best to give you as much exposure as we possibly can to potential users, collaborators, so people that might want to join your team, and also investors. And Seb and Jesse can basically guide you through that whole process. And I think next week we'll be talking about like, hey, how do I throw my data on Arweave? Have a session on that. It's really, really simple. If you want to get kind of deeper into the Arweave ecosystem, I think profit-sharing communities are the way to do it. So the profit-sharing community we'll get into later in sort of depth, but in broad strokes, it's a decentralized autonomous organization. So a group of people coming together collectively on the internet to build web applications instead of there being, or which aren't backed by a company, but are instead owned and controlled by a community. And we have a system of full stack assistance. So helping you get started with like, what is the legal compliance framework you should be using in order to build such a system? Where do you need to go to hire developers? Trying to guide you through that process one-on-one, all the way from kind of zero, where we are assuming you're at now, although, if you already have an idea and you already have some traction or just, maybe build a prototype, then we can work with that too, all the way through to funding and users. We've done this for like, I think, 30 to 40, I guess it's got to be 40 projects now. And a lot of those have gone on to raise, very serious amounts of VC capital and quit their jobs and build teams around their projects. And so we kind of know how to do this at this point. And we're very, very excited to help you guys get on board with it too. Okay. The critical component here is that we're just going to give you support all the way through the process of either integrating Arweave or building that entirely new decentralized web application from scratch. So that all being said, that's the program. Why should you actually care about decentralized web applications in the first place? So Arweave is a permanent ledger of information at the fundamental level. And what this allows you to do is to create a protocol on top, or a set of protocols, which expose a web. So Arweave, the base layer, is really just there to replicate information and to pay for the storage of that information using an endowment structure. That's basically what it does. And there's no single place on Earth that controls the replication of that data. It's just kind of everywhere. Everywhere there's an Arweave node, there is a, would you say, a part of the control of the protocol. But this is just like at the most sort of fundamental level what's happening. On top of this, the permaweb is a set of protocols which expose a permanent and decentralized web to web browsers, all of which is stored on the Arweave network. And this brings us to the point that we're here. We're here to take web applications that would previously run in this centralized space that we have on the web right now and turn them into decentralized web applications. From the UI itself to database queries and smart contracts and backend nodes, you can build the entire thing on top of the permaweb with absolutely no need for centralized components. And this means that you can have purely community-operated web applications, which is a really fundamental change, because we think that the core problem with the existing web is that users must trust the companies that produce their services. So you can think about this in a simple case with Facebook, for example. Facebook is, and actually this is a really extreme case, because Mark Zuckerberg owns 57% of the voting power in the Facebook corporation, even though he has 11% of the shares, because he has these Class A shares and everyone else has Class B. Yes, so Zuckerberg basically controls Facebook, full stop. And Facebook is offering you a service. And that means that, and this service has become very deeply more storage ones. Let's get rid of that. Helpful. Okay. Yes, that means that everything that you do in that platform is controlled by essentially one person, and that platform itself has become deeply embedded into your life and the life of everyone around you. And there's nothing we can really do about this other than to have decentralized alternatives. And so we see a new paradigm emerging where we take the services of the old web and we turn them into protocols. And we take the companies of the old web and we replace them with communities. And what's actually really interesting about this is that this is more of a return to the norm rather than a completely new paradigm, I would say. And the reason for this is back in the early days of the web, back when, frankly, there wasn't much money being thrown around, there were just protocols to do things. So you can think of HTTP itself, so the web, SMTP, email, and IRC, which is chat, relay chat. All of these services in the early web were produced by protocols which were not monetized. That meant that they were open and composable, which was great, but it also meant that they didn't accrue any value. And this led to this change over time, which sort of really got going, I think, mid-90s, where people were like, oh, okay, if we're going to make the best use of the internet, we should build companies which create services that capture value one way or another. And the way that you tend to do that, unfortunately, is to lock your users in to the service. Sorry, Seb, Jesse, can we stop with the dinging noise if possible?
Yeah.
Yes. So you lock people into the service, and when you do so, you are able to capture value in the unit, which in this case is the company that provided that service. But it also means that the service itself can be bent at any time to your whim. And this led to strange behavior in about the early noughties, the 2000s, to, I guess, really around now or just a couple of years ago, where we have this process in which people take VC capital, which more or less bankrolls the process of market capture, such that you have a large number of people that are kind of stuck in your service, which you do, at a low or free cost. So you're essentially running up a Yeah, I mean, you're running into debt. You're not profitable during this period where you are building a moat of users that can't leave your service. And then at some point, you change the game and you turn on monetization one way or another. So whether it's adverts, you're selling people's data, I guess introducing subscription fees. It's a big three, I suppose. One way or another, once you've captured the market, you turn on the money taps, if you will, and now you repay that debt, and much more so. And that's why the VC model in Web 2 works. But of course, it's not great for the user, right? Well, the interesting thing is that now with protocols that can be monetized, we don't have to play this game. We can make it so that the protocols are immutable, and so they can't be changed or co-opted or subverted by their creators and the organizations that created them. And we can make it so that they, have all these properties that are great about protocols like openness, and composability, but also have it so that the people that build those protocols in the first place are able to capture the value that they've created. And that was the reason we, moved away from it in the first place. Was like, if you built IRC, you captured zero value, which is obviously unreasonable. And that kind of is the story, I guess, of Web 1, 2, and the coming Web 3, I think. So web services built as protocols have significant advantages. The first is that they preserve consumer integrity. This is a little bit of a weird, wonky phrase, but what we mean by it is that for the consumer, there is integrity in the product. They can go to a perma-web application today, and they can be confident that what will be served to them tomorrow when they go to the same address is exactly the same. There is no way that the creator of that application can make that offering worse. And this just fundamentally removes that, that Web 2 play of basically bankroll the adoption process with a great service that is operated at a loss. And then once you've got the market capture, you can just frankly exploit those users. This makes that impossible because now, while the developer, you guys, can come along and release new versions of the application, you can't go back and remove old versions of the application, which means that each new version must be strictly better than the old version. Otherwise, people won't adopt it. And so when you're using, for example, Weavemail or rwiki.wiki, the rweave knowledge base, you can be confident that the developers of those applications aren't going to be able to just come back and say, actually, we want to add adverts today, and nothing else that adds value to the application or protocol. Or they won't be able to come along to your Weavemail account and say, hey, actually, we don't like whoever it is anymore. Let's stop their access to their account. That just isn't going to happen. It's literally mathematically impossible. So this is a really powerful, would you say? Yeah, it's a really powerful property of really all of these applications. Another example that you could think about is on your social media or outreach systems, whatever they happen to be. I'm thinking like YouTube. You can build up a channel, right? Or you can build up a profile, and you have followers and people. You have an audience essentially, but you've invested time in building that audience. And now with the with perma-web applications, we can make it such that that audience can't be taken away from you due to the whims of some other person or some other group that you have no control over. We can make those systems fairer. So I think those are really, really powerful properties that are very attractive in the current age of the web. Another really amazing thing that these applications allow you to do is they enable permissionless innovation. So you can take any existing application out there on the perma-web and you can say, that's pretty cool. What if it did this? And so you can just essentially piggyback on the data that is already there and go wild with it, like build something new. It's if you were around in the late 2000s, there was this movement that they called mashups, I think, on the web, and it was just around the time that Web 2 was coming along. It was this idea that, hey, it's pretty cool that all of these services have APIs. What if we made it so that we just kind of like arbitrarily smash those APIs together and build new interesting things on top? And it was really cool. But of course, the problem was that the companies that gave you those APIs could A, arbitrarily change them, and B, just remove your access. And they had an incentive to do so. They had an incentive to sort of lock you into their platform because that's how they would extract value from you, and that's how the company would become profitable. Whereas what we have in Web3 is the same kind of idea, except with much more rigorous, would you say, constraints on the person offering the service, or reliability. You can be confident when you build on top of this stuff that it's not going to be taken away from you. Obvious example is someone built a Mirror viewer on top of the Arweave network. So Mirror is a decentralized blogging platform, kind of like Medium, I guess, with components of Substack. It was pretty interesting, I think. And it stores all the data on top of Arweave. Well, one of the problems with this was that the UI wasn't decentralized properly. So you had to go to mirror.xyz. So someone built on top of the Arweave a PermaWeb app that just used that data. And of course, because the data is there on Arweave, you can access it. You can just like display it in your application and remix it essentially however you want. And you can, of course, mix it with other things like, hey, which of these uploaders has an rVerify blue tick, or whatever it happens to be. Well, the cool thing about it is that it's combinatorial, right? It's got very, very high exponential increase in the number of options that are made available by any additional application that's added to the system. You add one more thing to the system or to the network, and now there's exponentially more options for things you can build in the future. It's really powerful. Okay, they are ownerless, the web applications on top of the PermaWeb. So what we mean by this is that once you put it out there, you as the developer can't take it back, and nor can anyone else. That nobody is able to control it. It just exists in kind of the closest analogy is public commons. This is really powerful because it means that we can disintermediate again the services from the companies that are building the services. So the user can use the application without having to have any interaction with the person or entity, whether that be like a foundation or a company that created the thing in the first place. And that just increases the amount that they can trust that the application is not going to be subverted or start to work against them. Another really cool and interesting thing here is that devs don't pay for compute in this model. Instead, you can just like pay to store the code, the flat code, so the HTML, CSS, JavaScript typically, on top of the PermaWeb. And then the user comes along and they ask for that data from a gateway, and the gateway serves it to them. And it's their responsibility, the user and the gateway operator, to have some reasonable economic relationship that allows them to access the data. Of course, this can be that like the developer can pay for some amount of access if they want, or they can you do that by running your own gateway, or you can just piggyback on an existing gateway, or the user can provision their own private gateway, right? Or pool together to do that. There's really like arbitrary combinations you can put together there. So this is really interesting because if you're thinking about like, hey, well, I want to build this application, but I don't necessarily want to like support it for the rest of my life. That's a burden, right? You can just kind of put it out there, set and forget, if you will. And this is also interesting from the point of view of the business models associated with these applications. So in Web 2, we all know that if you build a kind of successful web application, you have this problem that your costs scale linearly with usage. So the more users you have, the more you have to spend on servers. And that pushes you to monetize in a way that might not be in the best interest of the user. The obvious way to do it is to take VC funding, and then very reasonably, those groups want you to build up a base that can then have value, frankly, extracted from them later to repay them and more. Like that's the model, and it's very reasonable, but it's not necessarily in the best interests of your users, particularly if your users can get access to, in this different model where you don't pay for the compute, they can get access to it for actually very, very, very small amount of money, if any. Maybe they support it with adverts, but they get to choose which adverts from which gateway they use and so on. So this is a really powerful component of the system, I think. Finally, there's zero maintenance in these applications. So once you put it out there, you don't have to run servers. You don't have to do anything like that. You just set it and forget it, which is a really cool way of building, I think. It's kind of like when you create desktop or server software, right? Like a command line piece of software, you just kind of put it out into the world, and that's it. You don't have to do anything to make sure that your users can keep using it. And if it's like text or other programs that have been around for a long time, you've ironed out all the bugs and they just work like forever, which is really cool. Okay, so that's on the technical side, but there's a social side to what we're trying to build with Open Web too. And the community is like, has really taken this idea and run with it. So profit sharing communities are a fairer type of startup. So to back these perma-web applications that you can build, there's this alternate structure for organization. That we use that we call a PSC generally. So broadly, in a profit sharing community, what happens is you get ownership of tokens, and in the application, there'll be some component that says, okay, well, the user is interacting with it. This is an appropriate time to take a very small tip, typically. There's other sorts of models you can use, but that's the general one. So imagine you're uploading to a permanent blogging service or microblogging service. You're about to send your tweet or your post, and it says, okay, well, let's take a 1 cent tip or half a cent tip. And then you pick someone at random from your profit sharing community, so the owners of the tokens, and you pick them proportionate to their ownership. So if you own 50%, I own 25%, and Seb owns 25%, then you are twice as likely as Seb and I to get the tip. And you just send them the tokens. And this means that the more people use your application, the more tips are accrued to the owners, and the more you own of the application, the more of those tips you get. It's a kind of micro dividend-like system, if you think, or if you want to think about it that way, which directly links usage of the application to value accruing to the people that own it, either through purchasing that ownership or by building. So also inside these systems, we have skin in the game based voting, which ensures fairer governance. So the basic principle is that you take the amount of time that people are willing to lock their tokens to make them untransferable, multiplied by the number of tokens they have, and that's their voting power. And now you can have, if people own less, but they're really passionate about a project, they really care about it, they can lock themselves into the long-term outcomes of the project and get a higher stake or higher vote in the governance. This is really cool because it means that as people are locked, this mixed with the component that you're getting these micro dividends as users use the system. It's really insistent that I'm nearly out of space. The fact that these two components come together means that you're locking yourself into the outcomes of the decisions that you are making as part of governance. So if I lock my tokens for 3 years, then I really want to make sure that I'm making the right governance decisions, because I'm going to be exposed to the number of dividends created by those governance decisions over a really long period of time. And so now you have incentivized good governance, which is really fundamentally different than typical coin voting, as they call it. It's like I own 10% today, I get a 10% vote, and then I sell them tomorrow. Well, actually, now I'm like, why am I necessarily incentivized to why am I necessarily incentivized to do the right thing? I might actually be incentivized to enrich myself outside the bounds of the protocol if you have this system. And so this is a really powerful way of stopping that. We've actually seen that happen recently in a couple of different DeFi protocols, where essentially these larger investors or holders of the tokens are incentivized to vote for things that aren't necessarily in the protocol's favor, so that they can enrich themselves outside. You can imagine the simpler version of this attack is I own token A, and token A has a governance system where they print more token A relative to what people decide in the governance. So it's a kind of like liquidity mining programs. Okay, fine. Then I come along, I've got a big stake in token A, and I've got some really, really random token B that no one wants. Or so the price is very low. I've got a bunch of it. Well, I can use my voting in token A to increase the value of token B by saying, okay, well, we're going to give more tokens in token A to people that own token B when they stake it for liquidity. And of course, when you do this, now people are really incentivized to go out and buy token B. So its price spikes. You can sell token B, and then you can also sell token A. And obviously this is bad for protocol associated with token A, but the attack is done, it's over. So that's a really dangerous game that happens when you mix this sort of liquidity with, you can essentially call it direct democracy and DAOs. Yeah, but skin in the game-based voting gets around this. Or, firms up the system so people are incentivized to govern in a good way. Okay, another interesting component here is just like all tokenized systems, but not just like all web applications, you get early liquidity ensuring market efficiency. So the fact that there's early markets for these systems just means that, the money flows to the things that are best, and that helps them grow bigger. And so you have a more powerful market efficiency principle. Finally, ownership can be given as incentives in these systems. So when you are, trying to bootstrap, for example, the social network, you've got to have some way of rewarding people for taking part and producing the content, which is part of the value of the system in the early stages. Typically in Web 2, this is done by, you go out and you sell some ownership of the company so that you can get some dollars, and you spend those dollars on marketing. But a much more effective way of doing this is to say, actually, okay, you come along and you bring your 1,000 Twitter followers or whatever, and then I'm going to give you, I don't know how much, but some small ownership in the protocol that we are collectively building together that is this social network. And now they're incentivized to bring along their people. And you can also give this ownership in a locked way. So you can say, I'm going to give you this ownership, but I'm going to lock it for 6 months. So now you, as the new user, are kind of incentive aligned with the protocol for some period of time. And that's a really, really powerful way of bringing people into your community or helping build that community, while also filling the applications with the content that's needed to have good experiences for users. All right, so that's a kind of brief overview of Open Web applications, what the Arweave protocol is about, how you can use it, and the program. I'm going to throw to Seb now, who's going to take you through more of the details about what the program will entail and how it's going to run. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sam. All right, so if you like what you saw, you're probably at this point wondering, all right, how does it actually work in practice, the Open Web Foundry? So let's jump right into it. So the goals of the Open Web Foundry are to help you turn your idea into an MVP, and then to take that MVP and successfully bring that to market. And to do all of this in just 6 weeks. So that's quite the compressed timeline that we have here. So you might be wondering, how exactly do we do this? And the idea here is to do it through a structured program that both combines sort of like regular events that are at the core of our curriculum, as well as some flexible support that we're going to be providing on a one-on-one basis and as the program starts evolving. All of this geared to be really nimble and really fast and allow you to build as fast as you can. So for the regular events, we have deep dives and also weekly community spotlights. So the deep dives are classes on topics like token economics or mechanism design or fundraising fundamentals. And the weekly community spotlight events, on the other hand, they provide you with a chance to present what you're working on to the community and to get super quick feedback so that you can build faster and that you can build in the way that you're getting some user feedback very early on. For the ad hoc sessions that you can expect, you can find some workshops like how to build your perma-web app or how to build your profit-sharing community, as well as some one-on-ones covering any questions that you might have for your project. And these sessions can be scheduled in a very flexible way. So basically, you reach out to the SEO TI, and then we just find some time to talk to you and to find out how to best solve your problem. In addition to the regular ad hoc sessions, we'll be providing you with constant personalized support. So, by far the fastest way to get answers to any technical questions that you might have is to join and then post them on the Arweave Developer Discord. So if you have a question, you post it on Discord, chances are that someone in the community has already faced sort of the same challenges that you're facing. and they're going to be able to help you out in a very quick way. We are extremely fortunate to have, I would say, one of the most helpful and friendly developer communities out there. Besides Discord, of course, Jesse and I are always there for you, and we're going to be around not only in these sessions but also in Discord. And so whether it's a question of, hey, I'm trying to build this, has already someone built this, and maybe I can incorporate it in my application, or if just like general guidance, we're always going to be there for you. All right, so this all happens in 6 weeks, and the program really culminates with our demo day, which is like a big public event in which you'll have the opportunity to pitch to the entire community, and also to some of the most helpful investors in the Arweave ecosystem. So it's a big deal, and if you haven't been exposed to one of our demo days before, go to our YouTube channel, to the Arweave YouTube channel. You can find some examples there. It's a big deal, and the presentations are really, really interesting and cool. And so, this being as I mentioned before, a big deal, we'll help you prepare for demo day by offering you individual pitch practices. They're super intense, and in a compressed timeline, help you to really be ready to present to really top-notch investors and to the Arweave community overall. And this is not only through pitch practices, but also through some sort of design support that we bring, that we have in-house, to help you design everything for your successful pitch deck. All right, so that's what happens up to demo day, but it's not like there's a cliff. It's not like demo day and like, all right, goodbye, Godspeed, have fun. We really try to support you after the program as well. So we will be reaching out to, for example, the projects that we want to invest in, as well as other projects that might be fundraising at the time. And we're going to constantly be supporting you. And this support can come in the form of some marketing, some communications, as well as some, rather, specific, perhaps mechanisms to enable your successful go-to-market strategy. Alrighty, well, if all of this sounds good to you, you might be wondering now, okay, cool. So how do I actually get started? Well, there are 3 main things that you can do right now to get started. So the first and most important one is to head over to GitCoin and register your project. This means, actually giving it some sort of name, some sort of broad description. It doesn't need to be super detailed at this point in time, but it is crucial that you actually register in order for us to be able to identify, okay, you're actually serious about building something on Arweave. And then we can reach out to you and start working with you first in a deep dive to really try to understand what your project is about and try to apportion the resources that we have to help you with your project. Once you've registered, you will also receive an email from us to get started on that whole process. The second thing that you can do is to make sure to follow us on Twitter. You have it right there, Open Web Foundry, and stay up to date with all the upcoming events. There's going to be a bunch of them, and they're going to be sometimes in rapid succession. So make sure to keep in the loop. And third, you should really join the Arweave's developer Discord to get acquainted with the community and get answers to any sort of initial questions that you might be having. All right, well, that's really it from my side. We try to keep things super simple and really to the point. If you have any questions, any specific questions about the program, you can come find me, Sam, or Jesse outside in the lounge area. And yeah, thank you all very much for joining the session. And we're really excited to see what you're going to be building. So see you all soon, very soon.